High in the silent folds of Italy's mountains, where clouds cling to stone and valleys echo with forgotten songs, live the hidden mountain people, keepers of traditions older than empires. Their villages cling to cliffs like timeless watchtowers, their paths carved by centuries of endurance. This is not the Italy of crowded piazzas and marble halls, but a secret Italy, remote, resilient, and quietly eternal. The mountains guard their people, and their people guard the past. High in the Dolomite ranges, where pale stone rises like frozen waves against the sky, the Ladin people have carved out a homeland. Their wooden houses rest on slopes that glow with wildflowers in summer and vanish beneath snow in winter. This is a landscape of towering peaks and deep valleys, a place that shaped the Ladin tongue and gave rhythm to lives bound to the mountain. Theirs is a story older than nations, a voice that echoes from the days when Roman legions passed these valleys and left behind the seeds of a language that survives in secret folds of Italy's north. For centuries, the Ladins endured in their alpine strongholds, weathering the weight of empires and borders that shifted like storms. Kings and dukes laid claim to the Dolomites, yet the people held to their words, their songs, and their customs. The mountains demanded resilience, and the Ladins answered with stubborn pride, building homes from the forests around them, raising cattle on the thin meadows, and turning stone and timber into sanctuaries against the cold. Their lives were measured not by battles won or palaces built, but by survival, by the quiet triumph of keeping language alive in valleys where isolation became strength. But their story is not one of stillness. Conflict came with the modern age, when roads cut through mountains and borders pressed tighter, threatening to dissolve what centuries had preserved. In the shadows of the Dolomites, the Ladins faced a choice: to fade into the tide of stronger tongues or to carry forward their ancient speech. Their festivals, dressed in bright colors against the stone-gray backdrop of cliffs, became more than celebration. They became a defiance, a reminder that culture can burn brighter than conquest. The climax of their endurance is here, in the high villages that still hum with Ladin words, and in valleys where wooden houses lean against eternity. The Dolomites, jagged and eternal, have been both fortress and cradle for this hidden people. And as peaks turn gold beneath the last light of day, the Ladin story endures, not as a relic of the past, but as a living testament to how mountains protect those who belong to them. Far in the northern reaches of Italy, pressed against the towering walls of the Alps, life unfolds in the villages of South Tyrol. Here, steep valleys cradle wooden farmhouses, their balconies spilling with bright flowers in summer, their roofs heavy with snow in winter. Bells ring through the air, cowbells echoing across green slopes, church bells marking time in stone towers. This is Alto Adige, where the people speak German in an Italian land, a borderland where cultures have collided for centuries, but where the villagers remain rooted, carrying forward their alpine traditions with quiet strength. The story of these mountain folk begins in ancient migrations, when Germanic tribes pressed southward and found a home in valleys rich with pasture and shadowed by peaks. The centuries that followed were marked by shifting empires: Romans, Habsburgs, and finally Italy. Each change of power left its mark, yet none dissolved the rhythm of alpine life. The villagers endured by clinging to their farms, their language, and their faith, finding in the land itself a constant greater than any ruler. The mountains, severe and unyielding, shaped their days into cycles of toil and ritual, forging a culture bound to endurance. Conflict came with every attempt to erase their tongue. When borders shifted after war, the German voice of the villages was seen as foreign, threatened by policies meant to silence it. But on balconies, lined with red geraniums, and in barns where hay was stacked for winter, the people held to their words. Bells continued to toll across the valleys, their sound carrying not just time, but memory. The resistance was not of arms, but of identity, a quiet defiance rooted in the soil of their farms and in the voices of their children. The climax of their endurance is found today in the survival of their culture. From alpine pastures, where cattle graze, to harvest festivals, where costumes blaze with color, the South Tyrolean villages embody a legacy that no border could erase. Their houses, with wood darkened by centuries of sun, stand as watchtowers of tradition. And as dusk falls over Alto Adige, the bells still ring, carrying across mountains the living heartbeat of a people who endured, adapted, and remained unbroken. High in the rugged folds of Lombardy, where valleys narrow between towering cliffs, the Valtellina mountain farmers carved their world from impossible slopes. Their stone houses rise like fortresses above terraced hillsides, and vineyards climb the mountains in patient rows, defying gravity itself. This is a land of steep labor, where every stone set in the earth carries the weight of survival. In the high silence of these slopes, the farmers shaped not only their homes and fields, but an enduring bond between human endurance and the unforgiving face of the Alps. Their story begins with the ancient need to tame a hostile terrain. The mountains of Valtellina offered little softness, only rock, snow, and rivers that cut deep scars through the valleys. Yet the people refused surrender. With bare hands and enduring will, they stacked stones into terraces, creating fragile shelves of earth where vines could take root. For centuries, these walls have clung to the mountain sides, each one a testament to patience. The vineyards produced not only wine, but identity, a symbol that life could thrive even in places where the earth seemed determined to deny it. But the mountains also carried trials. Harsh winters threatened the harvest, and avalanches could sweep away a season's labor in an instant. Wars brought armies through the valley, claiming its strategic passes and leaving ruin in their wake. Still, the farmers endured, their survival bound to the walls they had raised. In their stone houses, built thick to withstand the cold, families gathered around traditions passed like inheritance. Their attire, woven in sturdy cloth and worn with pride, was as much a shield against the world as their terraces were against the mountain. The climax of their story lives in the sight of the valley itself. To look upon Valtellina is to see human hands stitched into the land, a living mosaic of terraces climbing toward the clouds. The farmers, guardians of this harmony, stand as proof that resilience can outlast even the most unforgiving peaks. Their vineyards ripple in the sunlight, their stone houses stand dark and strong. Their traditions echo in festivals where colors blaze against the gray of rock. Here, in the high heart of Lombardy, the Valtellina mountain farmers endure, carrying forward a legacy that is as unyielding as the stone they built upon. Far above the valleys of Bergamo, where jagged ridges cut into the sky and pastures spill across the slopes, the Orobic shepherds keep one of the oldest mountain traditions of northern Italy. Their world is one of silence, broken by the bells of sheep, of stone huts scattered across meadows, and of smoke rising from alpine fires. In this high realm, the land is harsh, yet it has sustained shepherd life for centuries. The Orobic story is written not in monuments or palaces, but in the slow shaping of mountain paths, in the wool of their flocks, and in the taste of cheeses born from rugged endurance. The roots of these shepherds reach deep into the ancient past. Before cities grew powerful in the plains, these mountains held small communities whose survival depended on sheep and the skills to live among stone and snow. Generation after generation, the Orobic people followed the rhythm of transhumance, guiding their flocks upward to summer pastures and downward when the snows came. This movement became more than survival. It became identity. Their huts of dry stone, their tools carved from wood, and their fire-warmed shelters carried a way of life untouched by empire, yet shaped by the eternal command of the mountains. Conflict was constant, not in the form of armies, but in the struggle against nature itself. Storms could scatter flocks, wolves once stalked the ridges, and avalanches claimed lives without warning. Yet the shepherds endured, bound to the land by tradition and by the knowledge that the milk of their sheep could be transformed into something lasting. From this knowledge came the cheeses of the Bergamo Alps, flavors rich with mountain herbs and smoke, wheels of nourishment that became both sustenance and heritage. In the craft of cheese-making, survival was turned into art. The climax of their story rests in the sight of shepherds guiding flocks across flowered meadows beneath peaks that touch the clouds. Their bells echo as living music of the Alps, each sound a mark of presence in the vast silence of stone. The cheeses, still shaped by hand and aged in mountain air, carry forward centuries of endurance in every taste. The Orobic shepherds remain guardians of a way of life that belongs to the peaks, a legacy of resilience where man, animal, and mountain are bound together in a story older than time itself. At the foot of Mont Blanc, where glaciers crown the horizon and valleys carve deep into the heart of the Alps, the Aosta Valley people have built their world of stone. Their villages rise like fortresses against the mountain winds, with towers and walls standing firm as if carved from the rock itself. Between the lines of vineyards and alpine pastures, voices flow in both French and Italian, echoing the layered history of this secluded valley. This is a land of borders and passes, where cultures have met for centuries, and where the people forge their own identity in the shadow of Europe's highest peak. Their story begins with the Romans, who carved roads through these mountains to link their empire across Europe. Forts and bridges still stand, reminders of an age when armies and merchants moved through the valley, leaving traces in language, stone, and custom. Yet while emperors came and fell, the villagers endured in their fortified homes, surviving harsh winters and the constant threat of invasion. Their walls were not only defense against enemies, but against the elements themselves, built thick to guard against snow, wind, and time. The mountains taught resilience, and the people answered with permanence. Conflict shaped the valley as rulers fought for its strategic passes. Dynasties laid claim, borders shifted, and the weight of power pressed down upon the small communities. Yet the villagers held to their dual tongues, speaking in voices that carried both Latin and Frankish echoes. Their culture became a bridge between worlds, but their strength remained in the stone they built upon. Castles crowned the cliffs, watchtowers guarded the ridges, and villages stood like anchors against the storms of history. The climax of their story is not in conquest, but in survival. The Aosta Valley people remain as keepers of a heritage woven through centuries of struggle. Their fortified villages, dark against the snow, stand as living monuments to endurance. Their fields and vineyards climb the mountainsides, nourished by glacial waters, while their voices carry the harmony of two languages shaped by time. Beneath Mont Blanc's eternal presence, the Aosta Valley continues as a land of guardians, where past and present remain bound by stone, language, and the timeless strength of the High Alps. High in the Carnic Alps of Friuli Venezia Giulia, where mist drifts through forests like ancient breath and ridges rise in endless folds of stone, live the Carnic Highlanders. Their wooden houses, darkened by rain and snow, stand clustered in valleys that feel carved from time itself. Life here is shadowed by fog and forest, shaped by silence and ritual. The Highlanders guard traditions that echo from a world long before cities, where weaving bound families together and ancient rites gave rhythm to the passing seasons. In their remote villages, the line between land and spirit has always remained thin. The story of these mountain people begins in isolation. The Carnic Alps, steep and veiled in cloud, cut them off from the lowland world, forcing self-reliance in every form. Wood from endless forests became shelter, cloth, and craft. Wool was spun into garments, woven with patience, threads carrying the memory of mothers and daughters who worked by firelight through the long alpine nights. Rituals, whispered through generations, tied them to the earth, the trees, and the stones, giving meaning to hardship. Their world was built from scarcity, yet enriched by belief and community that endured beyond empires. Conflict came not only from nature, but from history's march across their valleys. Armies once crossed these passes, leaving scars of conquest, while harsh winters demanded strength beyond measure. Famine and disease visited the mountains, testing survival. But the Highlanders met every trial with resilience. Their rituals grew into acts of defiance, celebrations that affirmed identity in the face of loss. Songs, dances, and fires lit in the fog became shields against forgetting. Even when the outside world pressed closer, the Carnic villagers clung to the forests, where their secrets and their strength lay hidden. The climax of their endurance lies in the villages themselves, still wrapped in the silence of the high valleys. Wooden houses lean toward one another like guardians of memory, and woven fabrics tell of a patience that never faded. In the fog that drifts among the pines, one can still sense the echo of ancient rites, the unseen bond between people and mountain. The Carnic Highlanders endure as keepers of mystery, their way of life rising like smoke through the forests, fragile, eternal, and inseparable from the peaks that shelter them. Across the rolling backbone of central Italy, where the Apennines rise in sweeping ridges and meadows unfurl beneath an endless sky, the shepherds walk their ancient paths. Their flocks move in slow rivers of white across the mountains, bells chiming like scattered notes of music against the silence. This is the land of transhumance, where people and animals have journeyed together for centuries, following routes older than memory. The Apennine shepherds are bound to the seasons, their lives written in the rhythm of migration, their story carved into the high pastures and valleys that stretch from one horizon to the next. Their tale begins in the distant past, when survival in the rugged heart of Italy demanded movement. To remain in one place meant hunger, but to follow the cycle of grasses and seasons meant life. and so they became wanderers of the meadows, crossing ridges with their flocks, sleeping beneath the stars, and marking trails that would endure for thousands of years. These routes grew into lifelines of trade and culture, carrying not just sheep, but songs, customs, and the wisdom of living with the land. Their huts of stone and wood, scattered across high passes, stand as markers of a people who built without permanence, yet left behind a lasting imprint. Conflict rose from the harshness of their existence. Storms swept the mountains without mercy. Wolves stalked the meadows, and isolation demanded strength that few could master. Empires came and fell, yet the shepherds endured, their identity preserved not in cities, but in footsteps across the earth. To watch their journey was to see history itself in motion, an unbroken line connecting ancient herdsmen to those who still guide flocks through the same mountain grass today. Even when lowland powers sought to control the routes, to tax or restrict their movement, the shepherds answered only with persistence, carrying forward the bond between man and flock. The climax of their endurance is found in the living tradition of transhumance itself. In the high meadows where the grass ripples like waves, the shepherds still walk the paths of their ancestors. Their bells echo across valleys as reminders of a culture that could not be silenced, a culture written in migration, resilience, and the patience of mountains. The Apennine shepherds endure as keepers of the moving road, where past and present walk side by side beneath the eternal sky of Italy's central peaks. Deep in the Calabria Mountains, where vast pine forests stretch like an ocean of green and mist drifts low across rugged ridges, the Sila Highlanders have lived in hidden solitude. Their stone hamlets rise in silence among the trees, grey against the dark earth, built to endure storms and time itself. Life here has always been remote, shaped by the rhythm of the forest and the shadow of the peaks. In this southern stronghold of Italy, the Highlanders carry traditions carved from isolation, where resilience is not a choice, but the very essence of survival. Their story begins in antiquity, when the Sila Plateau was a wilderness known for its towering pines. Ancient settlers sought refuge in its depths, founding small communities far from the rule of coastal cities. The forest provided wood, shelter, and mystery, becoming both cradle and fortress. Stone by stone, houses were raised to withstand winter snows and summer heat, clustered tightly for strength. These hamlets, simple yet enduring, became sanctuaries where people wove lives that bent to the land's will. In their silence, they preserved a way of being that resisted the tide of history pressing in from beyond the mountains. Conflict came from nature itself. Harsh winters locked the highlands in snow, while the forest could conceal danger as easily as it offered protection. Armies passed through Calabria, kingdoms rose and fell, yet the Highlanders remained apart, shielded by the wilderness. In times of famine or war, isolation was both a curse and a shield, forcing self-reliance while sparing them from conquest's full weight. Their stone hamlets stood as bulwarks of endurance, their pine forests whispering stories older than memory. Within this solitude, rituals and customs flourished, binding the community to the rhythms of land and season. The climax of their endurance is found in the survival of their villages and in the vast silence of the forest itself. To walk among the Sila pines is to feel the weight of centuries, each tree a witness to the endurance of those who lived in its shade. Their hamlets, rising like fragments of rock among the trees, speak of people who built not for glory, but for permanence. The Sila Highlanders endure as guardians of a hidden Italy, a world where forest and stone hold the memory of lives lived in defiance of time, resilient and eternal. High in the heart of the Apennines, beneath the towering bulk of Gran Sasso, lie the villages of Abruzzo. Stone houses climb the slopes like stairways into the sky, their walls weathered by centuries of wind and snow. Narrow streets twist through medieval strongholds, where bells ring from tall towers and shadows fall across archways of carved stone. Here, the mountains rise as guardians, and life has long unfolded in the rhythm of tradition, echoing through festivals and processions that blaze with color against the gray of rock. The Abruzzo mountain villages are a people shaped by stone, faith, and the fierce endurance of highland living. Their story begins in the medieval age, when fortresses were raised to protect against invasion and raids. The Gran Sasso region, remote yet strategic, became a land of castles and walled towns, where villages clung to cliffs for safety and strength. In these fortified settlements, the people built lives marked by hardship, but also by resilience, finding protection in unity and in the solid embrace of stone walls. The mountains offered isolation, but also defense, allowing the culture of Abruzzo to flourish in ways both distinct and enduring. Conflict was ever present, carried by shifting rulers and the harsh demands of the land. Winters swept across the slopes with icy force. Harvests could falter, and the path of survival was never certain. Yet in the midst of challenge, the villagers wove traditions that bound them together. Religious processions, alive with banners and bright garments, filled the narrow streets with music and devotion. These ceremonies were more than ritual. They were acts of defiance against despair, affirmations of identity in a world where survival itself was a triumph. The climax of their endurance lies in the villages that still crown the ridges of Gran Sasso. Each stone house, each cobbled street, carries the mark of centuries of persistence. The processions, still blazing with color, stand as living links to ancestors who endured famine, war, and storm. To walk through an Abruzzo village is to walk through a story written in faith and perseverance, where mountain walls protect both people and memory. Beneath the eternal gaze of Gran Sasso, the Abruzzo villages endure, guardians of a heritage that is carved into stone and celebrated in color. Deep within the Dolomites, where peaks rise like pale cathedrals into the sky, lies Val di Fassa, a valley of silence, tradition, and endurance. Here, the people speak Ladin, a language born of ancient Rome, yet preserved in the folds of the mountains. Their wooden houses rest on slopes swept by snow and meadow. Their festivals blaze with color against the gray stone. Embroidered costumes shimmer in candlelight, while carved wooden masks, fierce and otherworldly, dance through winter nights. In this valley, the people live between myth and stone, carrying a culture shaped by mountain solitude and the passage of centuries. The story of Val di Fassa begins with the survival of a tongue. When Rome's legions crossed these ranges, Latin rooted itself in the valleys, transforming over time into Ladin. While kingdoms rose and borders shifted, the people of Fassa clung to their words, passing them from fireside to fireside until the language became not only speech, but defiance. Their homes of wood, their embroidered cloth, their songs and rituals all carried the spirit of a culture that refused to vanish beneath the weight of history. The mountains became their shield. Isolation their greatest strength. Conflict has always haunted this valley, not only in the harsh winters that cut the land from the world below, but in the pressures of assimilation from larger nations and stronger tongues. Yet the people answered with celebration. Their festivals, born in the heart of winter, became expressions of survival. Wooden masks, painted with fierce expressions, turned fear into performance, allowing the villagers to mock hardship and celebrate renewal. Embroidered garments, passed from generation to generation, stitch stories into fabric, making each costume a living memory of ancestors who endured the same trials.